The man who invented Coca-Cola sold the entire recipe, the brand, and every future right to it for $2,300 and then died broke a year later, while the buyer turned it into a company worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Coca-Cola is the most recognized brand on Earth. It sells products in over 200 countries, runs more than 500 brands, and generates nearly $48 billion in revenue every single year. But none of that was in the cards when it started. It began in a pharmacy in Atlanta, Georgia in 1886, invented by a man who thought he was making medicine. Here is the part of this story that most people never hear. John Pemberton. The pharmacist who created Coca-Cola was not trying to build an empire, he was trying to treat his own morphine addiction. Pemberton had been wounded in the Civil War and became dependent on morphine as a painkiller, a common and devastating problem for soldiers of that era. He was desperately searching for an alternative, something that could ease the pain without destroying him further. His answer was a syrup he made from two things: cocaine extracted from coca leaves and caffeine-rich extracts from the cola nut. He called it Pemberton's French wine coca at first, because at the time, cocaine was a perfectly legal ingredient and was genuinely believed to have medicinal properties. Doctors recommended it. Pharmacies sold it. Nobody thought twice. But here is what is strange about the whole thing. Pemberton did not just make a drug tonic. He somehow made something that tasted extraordinary. And when Atlanta introduced local prohibition laws and he had to remove the wine from the formula, the drink did not collapse, it got better. He replaced the wine with carbonated water. That accident, forced by a local alcohol ban, gave us the fizz that still exists in every Coca-Cola bottle today. His bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, came up with the name Coca-Cola and wrote it out in the curling, flowing script that became one of the most famous logos in human history. And then things started moving very fast. By 1890, Coca-Cola syrup sales were at about 9,000 gallons a year. By 1900, that number had jumped to 370,877 gallons. That is a 4,000% increase in a single decade. But Pemberton never saw any of it. He was sick, deeply in debt, and desperate. In 1888, just 2 years after inventing the drink, he started selling off pieces of the business to anyone who would buy. He sold shares to multiple people, created chaos in the ownership structure, and eventually sold everything to a fellow Atlanta pharmacist named Asa Griggs Candler. Total price paid, $2,300. About $80,000 in today's money, for a brand that is now worth over $330 billion. Pemberton died the same year he completed the sale. He died with almost nothing. Candler, on the other hand, understood exactly what he had. He was not just a pharmacist, he was a relentless marketer. He gave away free drink coupons by the tens of thousands. He put the Coca-Cola logo on clocks, calendars, urns, and every surface he could find. He understood that people needed to try it before they would pay for it, so he basically gave it away until trying it became normal and paying for it became habit. Then in 1892 he incorporated the company formally, and in 1899 he signed the deal that would define the entire American soft drink industry for the next century. He agreed to let independent bottlers buy the syrup, produce the drink themselves, bottle it, and sell it locally. Coca-Cola would make the syrup and protect the brand. The bottlers would handle the rest. This structure meant the company could grow without building factories everywhere. It spread fast and it spread wide. By 1919, the Candler family sold the company for $25 million, about 1,000 times what Candler had paid Pemberton just 3 decades earlier. The new buyer was a businessman named Ernest Woodruff. His son Robert would go on to run the company for over 30 years and turn it into a genuinely global institution. The next major transformation happened during World War II. The US military wanted Coca-Cola available to American soldiers wherever they were stationed. Robert Woodruff made a promise. Every soldier in uniform would be able to buy a bottle of Coke for 5 cents, no matter where in the world they were fighting. The company set up bottling plants near military bases across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. When the war ended, those bottling operations stayed. That is how Coca-Cola became a truly global brand, not through a brilliant international strategy, but through wartime logistics. And then came the mistakes. In 1985, Coca-Cola did something that is still studied in business schools as one of the worst decisions a successful company ever made. They changed the formula. After years of watching Pepsi chip away at their market share in blind taste tests, they developed New Coke, a sweeter version designed to beat Pepsi head-to-head. They ran 200,000 taste tests before launching it. They were confident. The public reaction was catastrophic. Within weeks, Coca-Cola received 40,000 letters and phone calls from furious customers. People stockpiled old Coke. A man in Texas filed a class action lawsuit. A psychiatric hotline in Los Angeles reported calls from genuinely distressed people. A senator from Georgia called it a loss of an American symbol. Coca-Cola pulled new Coke after just 77 days and brought back the original formula, now calling it Coca-Cola Classic. The irony? The whole debacle gave the brand more attention and consumer loyalty than any advertising campaign could have bought. Sales actually went up after the reversal. But here is the part of the Coca-Cola story that almost never makes the highlight reel. In 2001, the company was hit with a federal lawsuit filed by American labor unions. The claim was that Coca-Cola's bottling partners in Latin America had hired death squads, literal paramilitary groups, to intimidate, torture, kidnap, and murder union leaders who were trying to organize workers. The lawsuit named multiple people who had been killed. It alleged that Coca-Cola knew. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed. The courts found it could not be brought in the US, but not before it generated enough attention that multiple American universities banned Coca-Cola products from their campuses entirely. Around the same time, protests erupted in Kerala, India over Coca-Cola's Plachimada factory. Local communities said the plant was sucking dry the local water table, leaving farmers with no water for crops and contaminating what remained. After years of legal battles, the plant was permanently shut down. And in 2015, the New York Times reported that Coca-Cola had been funding scientists and researchers who would then publicly argue that obesity was caused primarily by lack of exercise, not sugar consumption. The goal was to redirect the health conversation away from sugary drinks. The company was quietly paying for the science that defended its product. When the funding was exposed, the backlash was severe. This is the real pattern underneath the story. A company built on a cocaine-laced medicine, grown by a man who gave free product to millions, scaled on wartime military contracts, nearly destroyed by a single bad decision in 1985, and persistently controversial over what it does to communities, water supplies, and public health, and yet still the most dominant beverage company on Earth. That tension between the image and the reality is what makes this story worth understanding. John Pemberton invented it while trying to cure his own addiction and sold it for $2,300. Asa Candler bought it and built it into a national phenomenon through sheer marketing force. World War II made it global. The 1,985 New Coke disaster somehow made it stronger. And through labor lawsuits, water contamination allegations, and funded health misinformation campaigns, it kept growing anyway. The world's most recognized brand started in a pharmacy and was almost accidentally carbonated because of an alcohol ban. Everything after that is just scale.